This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anastasia and my guest today is Zora Benhamou. Zora is originally from Ukraine. She is currently a nomad and right now I'm talking to her from Spain. Zora is a gerontologist, a biohacker, and an advocate for women's health during the menopausal journey. Her motto is, menopause is inevitable, but suffering is optional, and I can't wait to learn more about that. She coaches women, and she also hosts a podcast called Hack My Age, focusing on biohacking menopause. Zora, hello, and welcome.
Hello, and thank you so much. It's a beautiful introduction.
I am very excited to learn so many things from you. We already had our pre-interview talk, and we just couldn't stop talking and chatting. And you already opened many new topics for me and widened my horizons. Let's start from basics. What is a gerontologist and what is a biohacker?
I know I'm so glad you asked that because I'm sure most of the listeners have no idea. I just seem to choose these occupations that nobody has heard of. But a gerontologist is someone who studies aging and longevity, but we don't only look at it from a biological perspective. We look at it from a psychological and a sociological perspective because we need to look at the whole life course from birth until death to understand how people are aging, why they're getting different diseases. And then we also like to advocate for older adults. It's not just about older adults. It's about, we do, of course, like to create social policy and make sure those people are protected for housing rights, transport rights, and so many other things. But we do I always say aging starts in childhood. And so we do need to understand that and not wait until you're old and you're sick and try to fix things. So I'm not a geriatric physician. That's a doctor who deals with older adults. But a gerontologist likes to look at the whole perspective, not just the biological side, which is super important. And the biohacker in me was so attracted to gerontology because biohackers basically it's just a person who wants to optimize their health. And we love science. We love to look at the data, but we are about self-experimentation. The only person that counts is you. So we do our own little N of 1 experiments, which means just that one person is you, because in a study we may have hundreds, thousands, million people and give some conclusive results. But if you are not going to have the same result as that other 100 million people, well, then that doesn't even matter. So a biohacker will take some usually external forces and then try to manipulate the biology, our physiology, to have a positive outcome. So the health optimization is quite the easy way out, because optimizing health is different than just trying to reach a number that satisfies your doctor. Because a biohacker, for example, if you get your blood work back and the doctor says, oh, well, everything's normal, you're in the normal range, yet you may not feel so great. You go, well, I'm quite disappointed because on blood work, for example, the averages, that average range, that normal range is just the average taken from the population. So we know that in the U.S., the average American is sick. The average adult over the age of 50 already has at least one disease of aging. So, meaning like diabetes, or maybe on medication, they have heart disease, or it's the beginning of it. But we don't want to be there. We want to extend our health span, which is the number of years we live with vitality and free of disease, and make that as long as we possibly can, have a very short period of disease and die quickly, rather than as it is today, the health span's about 50, and then we have maybe 20, 30, 40 years of disease and poor quality of life. So the gerontologist in me and the biohacker in me really love to come and merge together to bring solutions to my niche is women going through the menopause experience, and help those women to have a better experience and optimize their menopause.
So, Zora, years ago, when I was still reporting from crazy Hollywood, I wrote an article about biohackers when that just became a term. I understood them as some kind of detectives of
yes.
what is going on in your body. And as you say, you personally, and doing really, really detective work and very holistic view on you as a person to see how you can optimize your health. Would you say that's...
Absolutely.
And I want to share my experience or knowledge on your statement that aging starts in childhood, which I really, really like. When my husband was first diagnosed with cancer, we went to this fantastic doctor in America, and he told us something that I wish all parents knew, which is that 90% of toxic things that our body absorbs, we absorb under the age of 18. Because we were talking about diet for my husband and this and that, and I'm always about eliminating toxins. And it was interesting how he said that now is great, better late than never. But when you really have to watch out is under the age of 18. I just want to mention that because, as you said, aging starts in childhood. And I really believe that if we as parents are more conscious about what we feed, what we surround our child with, what kind of, cosmetics we use and detergents and other things, I hope that we can eliminate one piece of puzzle, because I do believe many diseases, including cancer, happen as a puzzle of many different influencers. But if we can eliminate those that we can, I think that's already a lot.
I'm so glad you said that. And it is absolutely, I'm in total agreement. We do need to, there's things that we can control and things that maybe perhaps we cannot control. So I think a lot of people heard already that skin cancer doesn't happen when you're in your 40s, in the sense that it didn't start then. It started because you didn't wear sunscreen in childhood, right? So again, then we're going, oh, well, what about the toxins in sunscreen? Well, then you have to make that judgment. What's the benefit? What's the risk? Perhaps find a cleaner, more less toxic sunscreen, or more natural sunscreen. But yeah, or just use whatever the shade and cover yourself. But yeah, if we knew that, and that goes for so many things. And when I say disease starts in childhood, yes, I mean, we're thinking about the physiology. A child is so fragile. And so, I mean, we are resilient, but yet our skin is thinner and we can absorb things better. I mean, it's faster. And so we want to make sure we're feeding our children healthy food that's not toxic, not just the garbage that comes out that we've been surrounded by for decades. And then we also want to think about the toxicity mentally that happens as well. And some of them are adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And there's an ACE score that we can take with older adults and say, oh, how many ACEs did you have in your life? And then the more that you have, the more likely you will have some kind of a disease. You're just more at risk. Say your parents are divorced, or you went through a war, or you even just somebody bullying you at school. It doesn't have to be, so dramatic, but you are taking it as something. It's that perception of stress more than the actual stress. So that really counts, and that does the damage in the body. It's the epigenetics. You have your genetics thanks to your mom and dad, your DNA, but it's the epi, which is around the genes that can be changed and altered as we go, for the better or the worse. It's just like little switches. We can switch them on or switch them off, switch the cancer gene on or just keep it off, or switch on the anti-inflammatory markers, and then we can switch them off. So we want to make sure that we try to harvest what we have in our control as much as we can to keep that allostatic load low. And what I mean by allostatic load is, imagine your life is a bucket, and you go through life and you fill up this bucket with experiences in life or toxins in the environment. And then after a while, it gets full. And when it gets full, that's when disease is triggered. So many people explain it as a disease is basically your genetics plus an environment plus a trigger. And then you get, I don't know, Hashimoto's or cancer or thyroid disease, whatever it is. And so because why do some people get them and why some people don't? And there's just many, many reasons. But you want to keep that allostatic load quite low, and at least clean out the bucket too, as if you can. So I don't want it to be sort of doom and gloom and somebody go, oh my God, I was just smoke, all through my 20s. Or you can clean up a lot of damage, humans are so resilient, and if we give it a chance, it can bounce back. But the way that our lifestyle is these days in the modern world is we just never give it a chance to rest, and we don't let it to bounce back. We don't dial into our bodies anymore. We're always looking on the. And so I really encourage people to just stop for a moment, breathe, and then look in and try to figure out, how can I allow my body to rest and to heal? Even if you don't go, I'm not sick. It's that allostatic load that you may not feel. And it's kind of, I always talk about looking under the hood. You may look okay on the outside, but if you open up the hood, getting your blood work done or doing some little testing, and you'll find out, maybe I do need to clean up the toxins in my life, or do a little detox, or rest, take a vacation. And then you really sometimes find out when you start cleaning it up, wow, I really needed that.
Zora, I am very curious to learn about your work with menopause, but I have a feeling that we can tackle that question through me asking you, or you telling us how you started this work. I just saw that you graduated last year in 2022 together with your daughter. So Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you became who you are, and how did you come to these topics?
Oh my goodness. I'll try to give you the short version. So actually, I was born in Los Angeles. I'm in LA, right? So my mother is Ukrainian, but Ukrainianism has been ingrained in my life since the beginning of my time. And so I always say, it's in my LA DNA to be interested in health and wellness, just because you're surrounded by it. But then when my mother got breast cancer, then I got a lot more concerned about health, not just looking good in a bikini. I just didn't want to die early of breast cancer. So I was doing a lot of research. I got into it because of that. And then eventually I became a health coach, and then I found the biohacking community. I thought that was amazing, because then we understand that we're all bio-individual. We can't just have a one-size-fits-all cure or treatment for people. And then with the mapping of the human genome in 2008, we got a lot of information that, in fact, because of our epigenetics, if your mother has cancer, well, it doesn't mean you're doomed to have cancer. Some people say 80%, 90% is lifestyle and diet, and it's only that 10 or 20% that is genetic. So they always say that your genes load the gun, but your lifestyle and diet pulls the trigger. So that was actually a huge relief for me. And then I delved into more the scientific side, and I discovered gerontology. And I thought it's going to be a great add-on to my existing knowledge. And it was fun because I got to teach the gerontologists about biohacking, and the biohackers, I'm now teaching them about what I learned in gerontology, and I can merge those two together. But it is that desire to live a longer, healthier life and not fall off the planet suddenly or too early, or have a long period of disease. And it's not a fear of death. It's just trying to be the best version of myself, to show up for my kids, because I'm so sorry my kids didn't get to meet their grandmother and hardly knew their grandfather because of disease. And I want to offer something different for my own grandkids. So that's been a very big motivating factor.
So what happened with menopause? How did that become a topic?
So in 2020, I started the podcast, Hack My Age. And then I just turned 50. And my listeners, there was about half male, half female, but I had a lot of requests to have guests on who speak about hormones, because a lot of women who were listening were going through the menopause transition. And then they asked about menopause, and I said, you know what, although I didn't have any symptoms, I thought, well, I better be prepared. I better learn about this, because you always think in your 40s, let's say, or your 30s, you go, oh, that's so far away. That's decades away. I'm not interested. And then if you don't have the symptoms, you're always not so interested. But then as I started to read, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is really important. And there are a lot of women who are suffering, and that's why they're asking for this information. So that's how I got into the menopause component, and I found it fascinating. I continue to interview guests who are just experts in every single field of the concerns that a woman who is in her 40s, 50s, 60s, more or less. And I also ask, as a gerontologist in me, asks about the guests, what about a 70-year-old, 80-year-old, 90-year-old? Because many of the women who are listening may have a parent who is that age. And we can learn a lot from our parents and our mothers, particularly by asking them questions. And I love the work that you do because of that. So that's how I got into it. And then I had to merge the biohacking with the menopause because there's so much either misinformation or not enough information. Women have no idea the options that they have today, and so this is where we need to sort of break that mold, disrupt that stereotype of a menopausal woman, just like we need to disrupt the stereotype of an older person as well. So we can hack it all.
Zora, are there any tips for either premenopausal or menopausal women? What would be your most important message to women who are facing menopause?
The most important message is you don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to just pull up your socks and grit your teeth right through it. We don't have to. So I would encourage women to understand hormones. I'm sorry, it's going to get a little scientific. You have to learn what the word estrogen is and what progesterone is and what testosterone does, and perhaps thyroid, and understand thyroid hormone. It's not as difficult as you think it is. You don't need to dive deep. You just need to have a general understanding and then read about menopause. Listen to the podcasts that I have. There's so many other podcasts as well on menopause. The options are endless in terms of how to suppress the symptoms if you're having them. So not everyone does. So I also would like people to change their attitudes about menopause. There are plenty of women I interview, just women off the street. I make these little 1-minute reels. And there are plenty of them who say, you know what, I have no symptoms. I just kind of sailed right through it. And these are women in their 60s or 70s. They're like, I don't know. I mean, and at that time, they didn't have the option of bioidentical hormone therapy. It really wasn't. There was a whole period of time when doctors were not prescribing it. Even today, they're still not prescribing it. And the hormone therapy has transitioned and changed so much. And it's actually protective instead of this stereotype, estrogen causes cancer, which is a fully false statement. If that was true, then every single woman in their 20s and 30s who are full of beautiful estrogen, keeping their skin plump and making it easy to build muscle, all those young people and teenagers would be having breast cancer, and they're not. So why is it? The question really is what's happening when we're depleted of our hormones as women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s getting cancer? Okay, there's a correlation there. You can't make that correlation with just, estrogen is bad for you. And so I really would like for people to educate themselves, get the information they need to know, come armed to your doctor with some questions, with some data, with some perhaps articles you found or books. But if you can read a scientific article and pull that out and share it with your doctor, it's a little bit more convincing. And if your doctor still doesn't want to listen to you and you're suffering, go find another doctor.
Let's talk about Mama Anastasia. She's from Ukraine. Tell me about her. Tell me about her life.
Well, she grew up in a village on the border, really literally on the border of Poland and Ukraine. And her parents, so she grew up with a poor family, but she had 3 other sisters. And her father went to the war for World War I, and he came back and he was quite abusive. So I know she went through some spanks and hits and trauma there. And right after the war, the village was split in 2. They sent half of the village to Russia, to the gulags, and those people didn't survive. And then the other half they sent to Poland. And my mom wound up in Gdańsk as a teenager, or as a even younger, just not younger than that. It was interesting is actually the border now was shifted. And so technically it's Poland. But she remained very, very patriotic all throughout her life. And so when she arrived in Gdańsk, as she was studying in university by then, she joined the Ukrainian Culture Club. She was singing in a choir. She was dressing in her Ukrainian vyshyvanka, which is a Ukrainian shirt, or always embroidering a little detail in her clothes. She was very adamant about never giving up speaking Ukrainian. She raised me and my brother with this attitude and this proudness, this pride of being Ukrainian. And as I was a teenager or even a child, I was just thought, I don't want this at all. Nobody knows what this is. I'm a weirdo at school. My mom hasn't refused to speak with her again in Ukrainian. So I was a little rebel, but it just wanted to fit in and be American. And eventually I caught up after I graduated from university. I was discovering my roots. The Soviet Union fell apart just at the time I was graduating. I went there, and then she survived to see me actually move there and move on that track and improve my Ukrainian. And the thing that stands out most about my mom is her patriotism.
What happened? So she went to university. What did she study? And how did she then end up in the United States?
She studied economics. Mm-hmm. And then my father, who has Polish roots, his parents were born, his dad in Lithuania at the time, but it was, the borders were so much different than they were back then. But he and his wife, my grandmother, my father's parents, they're Polish. But my father was born first generation in the U.S. and he spoke Polish, and he would go back to Poland. He had contacts. He was a world traveler. He loved it. And he met my mom at a baby shower. And he fell in love with her, got in touch with her mailing her letters. But she didn't get to the U.S. because of him. She got to the U.S. because her sister got a visa. And she managed to get out. And everybody was scrambling as much as they could to get out and go to America and live the American dream. And so her sister invited her. And when she arrived in Chicago, she called my dad, or maybe wrote him a letter, I don't remember. And my dad, she was working as a nanny, actually. And my dad went to the family and said, I'm sorry, I'm going to take away your nanny. And swept her off her feet and took her to Los Angeles. And then that's where I began.
And this was still during the communism. This was still way before So how did she ever tell you about how she enjoyed Los Angeles? That's a big, big, big move.
It's a huge move from a village, a poor woman living eventually in Bel Air and Beverly Hills. So she came a long way. And I remember she said she couldn't believe how much food there was. and the abundance and the choices were shocking. And she said people were eating a lot of meat. She couldn't, barbecues were happening all the time. And then she says, I got fat. And she's got fat in the sense that she wasn't, huge, but compared to what she was, she said, wow, this diet's not fulfilling me very well or not serving me. But she did eventually change that. But she was surprised by the abundance of America.
Mm-hmm. So what happened? She had you and
my brother. So she had my brother first.
Did she
2
work?
years later, she had me. She didn't work. No, after that, she didn't. Eventually, when I was probably finishing high school, she got a real estate license and tried to do a little bit of that, but not really, no.
I'm sorry to ask, but so what happened? When did you lose her?
I was 23 years old and just graduated university. She was 57, but at 55, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And in my mind, I was thinking, oh, well, people get over this. I mean, I didn't even think it's going to, lose her. It didn't occur to me. I felt like, oh, people survive this all the time. I don't know if I was in denial. I don't know if I was just on my trajectory, my positive mindset. But I said, okay, she's going to get over this. And she does the chemo, and she really suffered, and it looked like a horrible experience, but she made it she survived for 2 years. But at the end, I was living in Ukraine, literally just met my now husband, was so in love. And I got a call like, you better get home now. She's not going to make it. And I was so surprised. I think partly my family was protecting me to not make me feel like I have to go and see her suffer. Or if it was partly me being I don't know, but I remember just being really surprised. And I just flew in. She died the next day. So she like waited for me. So unfortunately, she didn't make it. And it's a pity because it just was way too early. And nowadays, I think the chances of survival would be much greater. And the interesting thing is that she was getting mammograms. Actually, she was getting mammograms, if I recall correctly, even twice a year. And sometimes I wonder, was the radiation? I mean, there's so much that you can go back. What was it? This? Was it that? I don't know. It's again, genes, environment, trigger, and you could talk to the cows come home on the topic, and you never really know. But I found it. How is it that she does the mammogram and they still didn't catch it till it was too late? And that's very disappointing.
Did you manage to speak to her? Was she still?
I was speaking to her on the phone, and then I remember when I came back, no, she was already on so much morphine. She wasn't really conscious. No. Yeah.
Let's learn from her.
Yes.
Let's honor her through her lessons.
Yeah, there's so many lessons. When you think about what is your mom, so I just listed the ones that popped up quickly. Not that these are, the most important. I don't know. It's just, in reflection, I was thinking, oh, what about this? There was this and that. So I just kind of listed what came to me first. And the first one was just never forget where you come from. And for me, it was my Ukrainian roots, because that was my mom, just so patriotic. And in the beginning, I mean, it clicked when I was in my 20s, and that's why I went to Ukraine after the fall of the Soviet Union. I was very curious about my own roots, and then absolutely loved it and just absorbed it all. Whereas I was resisting for so long, for so many years, and it does come back. And the only good thing that really came out of this war in Ukraine is that people now know where Ukraine is, other than just Chernobyl or something. But for all my life, people were like, oh, Zora's Russian. I'm like, no, they're actually different. And now people understand the difference, and I don't have to explain that anymore. So that's for me, never forget where you came from. Never forget your roots. That's why I gave my kids the Ukrainian names, because Markian is my son and Kalina is my daughter. So I never got a chance to actually, it was hard enough to get the French, with my husband's French and my kids, to get Ukrainian and get them to speak Ukrainian and all that. It was going to be really, really hard. So I thought, okay, if I fail in that department, at least they have their names and no one will deny. That's there. It just goes like that little stamp for my mom. And that's what I did learn from her. That was the first lesson I learned.
Interesting how we people who are so multicultural and move around and have children who have roots in so many different countries, we really learn to value roots and learn the importance of giving your child this feeling of roots and knowing where they come from. It's I think you take it for granted if you always stay in the same place. But once you become so mixed, and the question is, who is this child and where are his real roots? You understand how...
You're right. It is a very interesting thing that you brought up, because I always say that people are born with wings or they're born with roots. And then they can, of course, change that. But I was born with wings. My dad, my mom, always on the run, always moving, always living in different countries. I come from a mixed culture and living in another. And then met my husband, who's the same. And so now we are nomads since 2018, and we just keep going, and we're both like this. And there, it's not, I don't like to glamorize it. People say, oh, you travel. Well, we don't have roots. And I think that's also, there's some drawbacks to that. There's benefits and drawbacks to everything. And I think ideally is to find that balance. So if you have roots, well, you can sprout little wings if you want to discover the world. And if you have wings, well, you can stay grounded for a little bit.
Mm. Let's jump to lesson 2.
So my mother, she always took really good care of herself, which is, so ironic. She was quite unquote a health nut, eating broccoli all the time and telling me about the benefits. And I didn't really care at that time. And she also wanted to always look her best. So she would always put her makeup on before she left the house and always try to have a nice little outfit. And I kept that definitely fell into me. I'm a little bit like that. I don't want to say I'm a little vain, but I can go out without my makeup, but I do like to have, if I'm in a yoga clothes or something, have it nice or clean and look presentable. If I'm ever doing an interview, I do my hair, I do my makeup. I try to look my best, and I take care of my body as best as I possibly can, putting good food in it, getting sunlight, managing my stress, working on my sleep hygiene. There's a lot that we can do. And I like to feel and look good. That's just where I am right now. And I hope to keep that as long as I can. So she did teach me that.
That's quite Eastern European, isn't it? Because
yes.
It's so funny. I'm just saying, and my mom would be like, you can't leave the house like this. You need to comb your hair. I have this wild waves. So sometimes I just leave my hair. Well, no, she's like, you need to comb your hair and at least put some mascara on. So she made me very conscious about that. And now I catch myself doing that with my son. Like we were now in New York, and he would leave the house and he's wearing shorts or jogging pants. I'm like, you can't leave a house in jogging pants, but everybody does in America. I'm like, but we don't.
He'll thank you later for that. The one thing I didn't adopt from my mom was the high heels. she would always want to go out, and she was short, so she'd always want to wear high heels. So I did that for a while, and then I'm like, okay, this is really not good for my feet, my hips, my legs.
But like everything else, it's the question of balance and harmony and knowing how far to go.
Yeah.
Zora, I was so curious about this next lesson. I can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah. So I remember when she was probably just a year after we were closer to death, she was in her bedroom, and we were just talking about, I think she was trying to bring me a little bit to reality, because I think I was in denial. And she says, no one can go through this journey for you. So when you are dying, you're alone. In as much as you want to help me, or your dad wants to help me, or if people want to do this for you, they can't. So I was like, oof, okay. That was kind of a shock, but I could understand exactly what she was saying. Is it's you come into this world and you come out alone, and then you have all these people, and here we are, the reverse. We have all these people, but you go through it by yourself, and there's no one else that will do things for you. So it's kind of pull up your pants then, like this is the reality, and prepare yourself for that. And so maybe she was also somebody who tried to teach me how to lead and not follow. I was very much as a child a follower, doing things my friends did. I mean, it's what kids do, right? I wasn't naturally the one who marches to the beat of your own drum. She really wanted to teach me how to lead and be a leader and do things on your own, be independent. And I did become quite independent. I think she really wanted to impress on me that she was dying, and she probably was losing hope, and she's in it by herself. And maybe she didn't realize this herself until she actually went through it.
But maybe she wanted to take the burden away from you, because when you take care of somebody or support somebody who's going through this process, you want to involve yourself as much as possible and take on as much as possible. And I experienced that with my mom. She also kind of built a wall between us in a strange way. She really wanted to own this process. She wanted to be in it by herself. And I think this is why she passed away. I always say she chose to pass away by herself, because she called me and she said, I'm not feeling well. Call my doctor. And I hopped into the cab immediately. I was there 10 minutes later and she was already gone.
Wow.
I really have.
And you were close. Yeah, you were very close to your mom.
And I really know that that she would have waited for me if she wanted to, if she thought that was right. And I really feel that she knew or wanted to. This was her thing. Her death was her thing. And this is why I'm so deeply touched by this lesson. And I had a very, very beautiful conversation early on in this podcast with my dear friend Caitlin Lefel, who also lost her mom to cancer very early. I think she was your age. And we talked a lot about this process. And Caitlin saying the same thing. She said, my mom owned the whole process of dying. She was very protective of it in a way, which was very interesting.
That is interesting. Is there any associations you can make with cultures or cultural attitude? Because your mom from Croatia, my mom from Ukraine.
No, because her mom was American.
My mother, didn't even tell her sister she had cancer.
Yeah. Nobody was allowed to know with us either. Nobody, only best like 2 people, 3 people were allowed to know, and she didn't. Nobody knew.
Interesting.
Same like you. Let's go to a more fun note. What about other people?
Oh, yes. I remember she was constantly telling me, don't care what other people think. While I'm a teenager, try to digest that. That's she would give me books about not caring what people think and so your attitude. And I just, as much as I'd love to, I found it just so hard. And I grew up a people pleaser, and I'm a recovering people pleaser right now. It's just one of those things. I do care, but my husband would actually say I totally don't care. So it depends how much you ask. There's the people pleaser, but then there's other things that I really don't care about and never did. That's just maybe she did get to me somehow or another, but I think she's so right now. I wish I could go back and reread that book or go back in time and take that on a bit more seriously, because going through life trying to people please and care what other people think, it's just so heavy and it does take its toll on your adrenal glands and your cortisol and your hormones, and eventually catches up with you as thyroid disease or something else. It's a lesson I learned, but I don't know how much I actually embedded that into me. But I'm definitely very proactive with that right now.
Zora, do you think it's a question of age? Do you think more or less most of people go through that phase when we're younger, and only later in life we're like, I don't give a damn? I think we just need certain experiences and age to learn that lesson.
Definitely. I mean, we learned this in gerontology. As you get closer to death, you start to prioritize things in your life. You're like, I have not much time as I had when I was younger. So you start to spend more time cultivating those relationships that you value, and you try to get rid of the other ones. You don't try to make new friends in this sort of midlife phase, like 50s, 60s. It was a famous gerontologist, Gene Cohen, was calling this the if not now, then when phase, where women or men also take more control of their lives. Like, I've always wanted to write a book. I always wanted to start this new business. I always, wanted to say this to this person. We start to clean up our lives and get the guts to do the things we want to do, or say the things that we want to do, or build those boundaries that we should have been learned earlier in life. And it just so happens, at least through his research, that it does happen in midlife, and it does come with age. Not everyone, but many people are going through this transition. And that's the best thing about turning 50 or going, through this transition. You start to go, I don't really care. And there's some women, or researchers and people doctors I've interviewed too, where they say, well, it could be also part of the changing hormones as well, in the sense that we're a little bit, we have a shorter wire, which is not always good, but at the same time, actually, it can teach us how to build boundaries. We just have to make sure we do them without burning relationships or causing problems. We don't have to do all these things without grace and integrity. We can really, I think it's a time. Comes with age. So you are right.
So let's talk about, I think we covered all the lessons you wanted to share, didn't we?
Yes.
Let's talk about things you wish she had taught you. She wasn't able
well,
to teach
yes. The first one that came to my mind was, I wish she taught me how to cook. which is, she was just not into cooking. And of course, she would make vareniki, those, Ukrainian dumplings, a couple times a year, but she wouldn't really want me to participate very much and pass on that recipe or whatever. She wasn't like that. She was much more efficient, just wanted to get it done. And so when I met my husband, when I was 23, he's French. And he lives to eat. And I was just eating to live. And so I was like, how am I going to please this man? And I was like, I got to cook a meal for him. And, I was so excited about him. And I thought I did wind up learning how to cook, but it was actually his mother that taught me how to cook. And because I really was just ready for it, whereas I probably wasn't very interested before, but now I was like, oh, I really want to. And then that she's a Moroccan Jew. Well, was born in Morocco, French Moroccan Jewish. Mm-hmm. So she get all these amazing recipes, and I still have today, and I pass on to my kids, not so much in teaching them how to do it because they were like me. And the other day, my daughter she's 23, and she said, I wish you taught me how to cook. And I was like, well, it's not too late. Like, just come in the kitchen and I'll teach you. But she's starting to get a little curious, but I do wish I had that a little bit earlier, but I eventually got it.
You and I have same lessons that we wish
really?
Because my mom also wasn't a big cook. She was a woman of 2 careers and a very lively social life, and everything else was more important. But also it's interesting speaking to so many women whose mothers haven't taught them to cook say this. And, nowadays with all the feminism and emancipation and everything else, obviously it's a skill that we don't necessarily have to connect with being a woman or anything else, but just like, this is a life skill. I wish my mom
taught me. It's a life
skill. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I always tell people. The hardest thing about cleaning up your diet and trying to find things is you got to get a cutting board, start chopping and shredding. And I know it's a pain, but it's going to serve you so well and change your life. But it is hard for people who've never done it before. Right. So I love that lesson.
And we share the next one as well.
Oh, do we? Okay.
But maybe because we come from mothers of, who grew up in communism. So.
Yes, exactly. So yes, the thing I wish she taught me was how to make money and how to be financially independent. And unfortunately, I lost her too early. Maybe she would have taken off with a career, or maybe, there's so many lessons I know I would have learned if she was still around, and she would have evolved, and that I really, really miss, and having that. But I really wish she taught me that, because it's a terrible thing to say. I hate to say it, but I remember she said, love shmuv, like, who cares about love? She says, you marry a man who's either very rich or very smart. And I'm like a scientist, or come up with a patent or something. Yeah. And I was like, I was watching the movies. I grew up in the U.S. I was like, sorry, I cannot. I'm not going to marry for that. I'm going to marry for love. She's like, that goes away. It's like, oh my God. Although she was with my father, all this time, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I chose to ignore that. But she kind of called, I think she even gave me a book, like Marriage is a Business. Mm. And my husband is a big businessman. And he kind of says that himself. And he says, you better choose your partner well, because when the shit hits the fan and you need support, you need a good partner. And so there is some truth to that. And I can see exactly what she was saying. But I wish she just said, look, start your own business, or be more independent. Don't look for a man, to make you happy or whatever. It's just, I didn't get that lesson. And I'm learning it from my husband, who's brilliant. And I remember when the kids were probably around 10 or so and going to school more full time, I was like, okay, honey, you got to teach me how to make money, because something happens to you, I'm totally dependent on you. And what will I do? And my husband's 10 years older than me. So I'm always in my head like, oh, he's going to go before me. Like, who knows? But you have that. I felt really hopeless. And so he is my mentor, and he is teaching me, and he's amazing with that. So I am learning, but I really wish I had it earlier on, or somehow somehow I was always active. I would say when I had small children, I was living in Russia at the time and Ukraine. And I didn't, it was hard to work. We didn't have internet. I couldn't get a working visa. There was some obstacles, but I guess if she were maybe more insistent or taught me a bit more, maybe I would have tried harder to somehow get that visa or somehow work and make some money while raising my kids. I kind of wish I did that. I would take classes on how to build a website. I mean, I was active with charities, and I was not like I was sitting home doing nothing and just raising the kids. I had that drive. I had that energy. It's a pity I didn't use it towards how can I get a job or make some money. And so we're in our household, we talk a lot about money to our kids, and not that it's not an evil. It's not the making money for the sake of money. It's just to allow you to do the things that you want to do and be able to have something also as you age and get older, and you'll be able to just be financially independent. That's, I think, a very important lesson that I didn't get taught, and I'm just learning right now.
It's the relationship with money and understanding what money represents. And yeah. I also, growing up with a mom in a communist country, plus a mom who was an artist, money was dirty. You know, I grew up with two parents seeing, you know, earning money as selling out your soul and your artistic values and things like that. And so I also have a very skewed, wrong relationship with money. I wish it was ingrained in me that what money really means, you know. But we're learning yes. and growing and developing.
Exactly. We can always change. And I'm so glad you asked these questions about what are the things that we learned? It sounds great, but what are the things we didn't learn that we would? I think it's a brilliant question, and it makes us reflect and then decide also, how do you want to teach the people in the world around you? And we can be a positive influence and hopefully lead by example.
Before we recap quickly, is there anything else we missed?
Oh my gosh, yes and no. I could talk about this. I love your podcast. I love the idea. I think I'm so glad you did it. It's really great that we can reflect on our mothers, whether they're with us or not with us. Because when you asked me those questions, I thought, well, I never really thought about it and put it on a piece of paper. But I think it also helps with aging and longevity is that gratitude for the things that you've learned, whether they were hard lessons that were painful or they were positive lessons. It's who you are, and being understanding that be grateful for that. It helps you get through life a little bit easier, and then you can change your life by putting a positive spin on it.
So let's very quickly recap. We learned the importance of roots. We learned about taking care of yourself and looking your best whenever you can. We learned about the dying process, and that when you are dying, you are essentially alone. We could have a separate podcast on that. We learn to not people please and not care what other people think. And then we also learned about the importance of cooking, having cooking skills as essential life skills, and also a healthy relationship with money. I think this is, and from you, Zora, we learned that you don't have to suffer menopause. And for the listeners who want to learn more about your work where can they find you?
hackmyage.com. It's hack for like biohacking. And websites has menopause programs, and it's got information there. But I also have Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube, all Hack My Age. I try to make it easy. And if you cannot remember that, can you remember Zora the Explorer? People have given me that name since I started on social media because I travel a lot, I explore a lot. And Zora, it sounds like Dora the Explorer. So if you Google that, you can always find me too.
But also we'll put the link in the episode notes so people can just click. Zora, thank you again. This was fantastic. It's our second big conversation, and I think we could have many, many more. Thank you so much for being my guest and sharing so much wisdom, both yours and your mom's.
Oh, it's a wonderful opportunity. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyoumama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Tider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.